Thank you very much for watching this presentation. I am Kruakae Pothong. I'm a visiting research fellow at the London School of Economics and Political Science. During this research project, I served as a research fellow in the Computer Science Department at University College London. I'm here on behalf of our team to present our approach to engage people in a critical assessment of technology-enabled transparency and what they deem acceptable and responsible trade-offs concerning transparency practices. Societal issues surrounding the trust people have in their social, political, and economic interactions have led to an increase in desire for transparency of the actions and decisions made in human interactions. Over the years, we've seen technology solutions emerging in response to this call for transparency. Examples of these technology solutions include distributed ledger technologies, such as blockchains, and the open data movements. Commonly, these technology solutions deploy information-based technologies to deliver transparency or information visibility. But is information visibility the sunlight that kills all the social ills? Have we thought of its consequences? Will it burn us in the process? According to Zuboff, it might. 360 degrees transparency of business and government operations might be too overwhelming for consumers and citizens, and even meaningless if we cannot act on the information we have. Businesses and governments seem better equipped with the resources to extract benefits of greater information visibility about us. Even so, there is a price to pay for everyone, whether you are individuals, businesses, or governments. To make transparency and information technology that enables transparency to work for consumers and citizens and other stakeholders, we first need to explore the intended and unintended consequences of transparency and work out what acceptable and reasonable trade-offs are for the parties involved. In this paper, we focus on what would be acceptable and reasonable trade-offs for individuals and businesses, and what these trade-offs mean for the design and development of information technology and governance of the technology applications. To crack this puzzle, we developed a method combining live-action role-play, LARP, with deliberation for examining the attitude and expectations of individuals and businesses towards transparency. We used LARP as a means to facilitate the co-created human experience through improvisation with transparency in daily transactions with social contexts of food, fashion, and finance. We used deliberation as a process to help people in their characters to share their co-created experience, and based on that identified what their characters, given their different life circumstances, found problematic. Then we invited participants to reflect on their co-created experience with transparency in our post-LARP reflection. As part of this reflection, we asked whether they could relate to any of the problems that their characters identified and how they envisioned the problems be addressed. We paid a lot of attention to character design to ensure that our participants would encounter life experiences that are different from their own, and that anyone, irrespective of their actual demographic backgrounds, could relate to and play these characters. Our design of these characters was based on a 5-factor model of personality and participants' responses to the pre-workshop survey concerning the factors that shape their purchasing decisions and information sharing preferences. We then randomly assigned these characters to our participants and asked them to fill out their dilemma diary as their characters before joining the workshop to practice making decisions in these characters' shoes. We used dilemmas tailored to the roles of either consumer or business characters to situate participants in their daily interaction with the highly information-dependent society. We created 2 sets of dilemmas, one in the present day and the other in the future. Both the characters and dilemmas were used to expose participants to aspects of transparency within social contexts that they are unlikely to have experienced, thus challenging participants' familiarity with transparency and opening opportunities for participants to explore various transparency practices and outcomes. This following video offers a taste of participants' co-created experience with transparency in our LARP and the problem of present-day dilemma that they encountered.
We're in a moment of a PR fiasco a little bit.
I want to ensure that as I run my business, which is a collateral food store, that I can really make a difference.
As a consumer, if we can afford it, it would be nice to promote brands that show a more concern about how they produce their foods, their goods, and where it comes from.
Then we took participants time traveling to the future, 10 years in 10 seconds, to the age of 360 degrees transparency. Participants in their characters then share their experience of transparency consequences in relation to the changes in the evolution of transparency practices in various industries. From their experience sharing, participants in their characters began to identify what they found problematic about transparency.
Welcome to 2030 in food. The automation of food packaging design means that we can immediately see the environmental and social impact of different products. Food will now display the same kinds of hazard warnings that we are so used to seeing on cigarette packaging. In fashion, thanks to augmented reality technologies and 7G, we can dress in the highest fashion while safe in our hazmat overalls and face masks. It's better for the environment too. In finance, demands for transparency in banking have had a controversial knock-on effect for citizens. Our credit ratings and financial statuses are visible to all at all times.
I find that it helps me know who I'm talking to.
I also think that now people are just judged on their financial situation, and I feel very oppressed by that.
We went through restructuring and I got sort of restructured out, but before I left, I was able to hook myself up with what actually I think is the real fintech nowadays, and that is how to hack the distributed ledger.
In our LARP, participants in their characters identified 3 burning issues. One is trust in information and accountability, another is information delivery and priorities, and the third is blurred boundaries between public and private information. We asked participants again when they came out of their character whether these problems mattered at all. The following video demonstrates how participants as themselves, not their characters, related to and reflected on the problems that their characters experienced in our LARP.
Most companies these days have such poor reputations that we need a lot more from them in order to feel we trust them at all. Transparency on its own won't solve that.
I think there's a problem between data, information, and knowledge. There is this idea that somehow the more data points you have, the more knowledge you have, and that's not necessarily related.
There's a real problem with how feasible it is to display data to actually track the sources of a lot of things.
As captured in the previous video, participants as their individual selves can relate to the problems they identified when they were in characters. The parallel participants drew between their characters' transparency experience and their own daily engagement with information-based technologies led them to exchange views on limits of transparency. They spotted the similar problems that their characters did and critiqued the ability of transparency to promote individual agency, relationship between transparency and trust, the abuse of transparency, and the flawed assumption that more information would generate more knowledge. Based on these problems, participants then deliberated on potential solutions to address these limits of transparency that they identified. These solutions ranged from regulations such as antitrust law to business incentives and technology solutions such as data stewardship and data trust framework. The following video gives a snapshot of participants' solution brainstorming.
If you remember all the whitewashing stuff, nobody believed the factory inspections because they don't trust the people who are paid by Nike to inspect the factories. How do you create a framework within which you can reasonably trust the people who are telling you things?
I think what would help me there is more government regulations. The example of the food labels in the future being the same as tobacco labels, that would be a step forward.
Can't make an informed decision about what the value of your data is or what it will mean in the future.
Then what is the solution?
Antitrust.
How can we help businesses to be more responsible and to make that demonstrable? That you want to identify and reward the best businesses and to create the economic incentives to be that choice. Essentially, the formula is transparency and accountability in a way that's provable and demonstrable.
So, what is the learning for design? Technology solutions alone are insufficient to deliver on participants' transparency expectations, which included the ability to dynamically manage and negotiate the type and volume of information made available according to the context of use, the ability to make use of information made visible to affect change, the ability to trust both people and technologies that they interact with daily. How then can design help make technology-enabled transparency work for everyone? 1. Designers should carefully consider the social context of use in determining what and how much information should be made visible when designing technology solutions for transparency, particularly one aimed at promoting trust and accountability. Context also determine whether technology-enabled transparency would be considered cost-effective for businesses, because in certain areas such as fashion, transparency in supply chain may not yield enough commercial incentives for businesses to invest, whereas in finance it would. 2. Context also play an important role in determining what the right balance is between transparency and privacy. This affects decisions, for example, whether to apply privacy solutions to distributed ledger technologies, because such solution can undermine the visibility of information that should be made public for audit, particularly in financial contexts. So, tread carefully. 3. Build in user-friendly control features to enable individual users to manage the type and volume of information made visible to them according to their levels of information literacy and the context of use. In this way, the information made visible would be useful and beneficial to both recipients of information and those who invest in technology solutions to make information visible. Thank you.